Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to discuss about the test case and test suite related settings. Overall, the test case related settings are of 5 types. The first one is the documentation, then we have tagging the test cases. After that, we have the test setup and teardown. We have templates, and lastly, we have the timeouts in test cases. So now let's discuss the first setting of the test case, which is known as documentation. Now, documentation basically allows to set free documentation for a test case. It helps to write that what this test case will be doing, and this test is available in the resulting test logs and the test reports. This documentation can also be provided in bold and italic. Also, we can provide links inside this documentation. We can also use the existing variables inside the documentation. Basically, it gives us a summary about what this test case is doing. So actually, let's go to the write editor and see where is the documentation section and how can we write a documentation of one of the test cases that we have created. So I'm going to go back to my write editor over here. So we had created 4 test cases. So let's actually go back to one of those test cases. Before that, I would like you to know that this test case settings, these settings are at test case level as well as test suite level. So right now I'm discussing this setting at the test case level. We can also provide the documentation of this test suite. So that will tell all these test cases inside this test suite a summary about those test cases. So I'm going to go back to my test case 01. So as we can see, we have a documentation section over here. Now let's actually provide a documentation over here. This is my first test case. It is used to compare two variables. Now, as I told you, we can also provide something in bold and italic, and to provide something in bold, we can write with this syntax. We'll start with an asterisk and we'll write anything inside these two asterisks and it will be in the bold format. So I will write test case 01. And let's see if we want to write something in the italic, and to write something in the italic we will use underscore. This will be in italic. Now we will close the underscore and I'm going to click on OK. So as you can see, we have our documentation. This is my first test case. It is used to compare two variables. So I should write here compare two variables. So yeah, and this is in bold, and as we write, this will be in the italics. Now I also told you that we can write a link in this documentation, and to provide the link we will say, let's suppose link is, let's just give a link, any random link. I'm just going to give a link for google.com. so I'm going to provide http:// and you will see over here that this link is provided over here. Now this is just a dummy text. Obviously, when we will be creating the actual test cases in our web-based automation, we will be having more meaningful test cases, and accordingly we will provide more meaningful documentation. Now let's learn the second test case setting, which is tags. Now tags is a very important test case settings. It is a simple yet free for classifying the test cases. Now it is used for the following purposes. It is shown in the test reports, logs and metadata for the test cases. It tells us about the statistics about the test cases, whether it's passed, whether it's failed, what is the current execution of the test case. And it also helps us, the most importantly, that which of the test case we should include and which of the test cases we should exclude, because when we have a test suite which contains a lot of test cases, but let's suppose we have a web application, and inside the web application we are testing a login functionality with, let's say, 10 test cases out of 50 test cases. Now we would like to run only those 10 test cases, so we can provide a tag for those 10 test cases. Now test cases, in tagging the test cases, it's for both test suite and for test cases. Now inside the test suite we have two types of tags: force tags and default tags. Now let's actually go back to the write editor and understand these tagging in detail. So I'm going to go back to the write editor over here. So as I told you, tags exist at both test suites level and the test case level. So if we go to the test suite level, you see over here, as I told you, we have two tags, force tags and default tags. And if you go over to the test cases, we just have one column known as tags. Now what is force tags, what is default tag, and what is just a tag in the test case? Force tags are something that if we provide a tag or text over here, that tag is applicable to all of these test cases. Now the next is default tag. What it means is that if these test cases, let's suppose TC01, does not have a tag over here, by default it will get tag of the test suite. Now let's actually give a tag over here. So let's give a tag over here as login. So I've given a force tag over here. Now if I go to my test cases, this tag should automatically be forced in all the test cases. So I'll go over here, see all the test cases, test case 01, test case 02, test case 03, test case 04. All of them have a login by default. Now let's actually remove this for now. So I'll just delete it. So I'll give a default tag to this test case. So the default tag, let's say I will give again login1, right? So this is just a default tag which I've given. Now if I go to the test case over here, everyone has default tag. But now the thing to notice over here, that if I provide a tag over here, that in the test case it will override the default tag. So I can write her name as login tc02. So you see, as soon as I write login test case 02 as a tag for test case 02, it overrided the default tag. Now let's actually learn the implementation of these tags. Now that we know that how to provide the tags, let's learn how are they useful to us. So I'm going to go back to my test suite and I'm going to go to the default and clear it. For now I will just going to my test cases over here. Let's suppose we have let's give a more meaningful tag to this test case. Just give it a name by login, right? So I'll copy this name over here. Also I'm going to go back to my test case 04 and give the same tag over here, login. Now we have two test cases, test case 02 and test case 04. Test case 02 says should not be equal as strings, we have two variables defined, and the test case 04 says should be equal as integers, we have two defined. Now let's suppose right now this is just dummy text, but will be when doing the web-based automation, this will be very useful. Let's suppose for now that these two test cases, test case 02 and test case 04, are related to a login functionality of a web application. So I'm going to go back over here, I'm going to go to run. So we have two options over here in run. It says only run these tests with these tags, and there's another option, skip the test with these tags. So we have both options over here. If you want to skip a set of test cases with a particular tag name, we can write over here, but if you want to only run the test cases with a particular tag name, we can write it over here. Now let's actually use those login and write it over there. So I'm going to put the same login over here. I'm going to save these test cases. Now we have two test cases with this tag and I'm going to run those test cases. I'm going to click start. It says no test selected, continue anyway. I'll click yes. As you can see, without even selecting the test cases over here, we had two test cases with a similar tag name and it shows the two test cases have been passed. Now let's actually go back to the report and see how it is useful. So I'm going to click on report over here. Over here we have our project report. See over here we have another column which says statistics by tag. The tag which we created is login. So we can directly simplify over here that what all test cases are passed by our tag. We see over here two test cases have been passed. Also we can click over tags over here and we can select our tag. Right now we only have one tag, but we're going to click login. It provides the results of our test case 02 and test case 04, both passed. So this is how tags are really useful when we have a bunch of test cases. Sometimes we have to run only a set of test cases, sometimes we don't have to run those set of test cases. So we can easily use the tag functionality in Robot Framework. And when we'll be doing the web-based automation, we'll be using these tags a lot. Now let's look at the third test case settings, which is the test setup and teardown. Now the test setup and teardown is this kind of functionality is something similar what other automation frameworks also provide. Like if we talk about JUnit or TestNG, we have methods over there before and after. What it means is that something you want to do before actually running the test case and something you want to do after running the test case. So test setup over here is that we have to execute this functionality before running this test case, and we have to execute this functionality after running the test case is the tear down. Now the good thing about tear down is that even if the test case fails, it is still used for the cleanup activities. Now here by cleanup activity means that we have to sometimes clean up the resources, such as every time we have to close the Chrome browser, or every time we have to kill the driver if our test case fails, the Chrome driver in robot framework. So these kinds of activity we are using in tear down. And what we use in test setup, it is something that for, let's say, is a web-based automation, and then every time we have to open the website, right? So we will use that in the test setup so that it is not a part of a test case, because this is something that we have to do before running the test case. Now let's go back to the write editor and learn more about the test setup and teardown. So one thing I'd like to let you know that this test setup and teardown is both exist in test suites as well as test cases. You see over here we have setup and teardown over here, and we have test setup and teardown over here. Mainly the difference lies is that if we are running a test suite and we need to perform an activity before running all the test cases, and we need to perform an activity after running all the test cases, we write it in the test suite. But if you want to run a setup and teardown before this test case, a particular test case, we get provided in the test case. So, and when we are providing the setup and teardown in the test case, it overrides the setup and teardown in the test suite. It has more precedence than the test suite. So for now, for explaining you over here, I'm just going to create two keywords over here. The one keyword we will write to a console before, and one keyword we will write to the console after running the test case. Now in the actual test cases, when we will be doing the automation further down the videos, we will be using the setup keywords such as open browser, and we will be using teardown keywords such as close the browser. But for this video, I'm just going to create two keywords over here. I'm going to right click over here, new user keyword. The first keyword which I'm going over here is, let's say give the name setup demo. I'm going to click OK. Let's create another one. New user keyword, I'm going to give teardown demo. You can give any name, like as I told you previously, we'll be having names such as close browser, open browser, but for now we'll just use a demo name, teardown demo. I'm going to click OK. And let's go to the setup demo. I'm going to expand the grid over here a little bit. So I'm going to use the inbuilt keyword over here, log to console. And over here log to console says that if you log to console, it says that logs the given message to the console. Just for the explanation, I'm going to provide a message over here. This is setup method. We can actually copy this and use it in a teardown. So we're going to use it over here. This is teardown. I'm going to go back to any of one of my test case. Let's go back to this test case. This one says should not be equal as strings, so we already run this test case. So in the setup over here, I'm going to click, and it says this keyword is executed before other keywords in this test case. And we can also provide arguments with a pipe character, so we can have one keyword and we can provide the arguments to it. Like we would have open browser and then the website URL, and then we have which browser we want to use. So here what we have setup is as setup demo. So I'm going to click OK over here. We have a teardown which says teardown demo. Just want to make sure the spellings are okay. Yes, so we have a setup demo, we have a teardown demo. I'm just going to save it. I'm going to go to the run. Now I'm not selecting this one, I'm just selecting this test case. I'm going to click on start. We can see the test case has been passed, Now let's go to the log of this test case and see the setup and teardown. As you can see, the first which was run is the setup demo, and it was logged to the console. This is a setup method. Then we have running our keyword, and then we go to the teardown and we say over here, this is teardown, and it provides the documentation over here. Now, as I told you, even if the test case fails, even after that, we will still run the teardown. So let's go back to the test case. Now we have this user keyword which we defined over here. Let's go back to this test case. Now here it says that should not be equal as string. So I'm going to click over here. This is the 0th index and this is the first index over here. I'm going to go back to my user variable. I'm going to click over here. Now I'm going to make it actually same. I'm going to make it Bharat. So now these two are equal actually. I'm going to go back over here. Now this should fail, and after that our still teardown should run. So I'm going to go back over here and click start. Now as you can see, we have failed this test case, but let's look at the log. Over here, if you look at the log, we still have the setup and teardown method in the green, which says that this is successfully run, but this keyword has been failed. So now this was how we use the setup and teardown method in our test cases. Mostly we will do the cleanup activities using the teardown, but we'll get to learn more about it in the future videos. Now let's look at the fourth test case setting. The fourth test case setting is templates. Now we have already looked at the videos where I was talking about what is the difference between data-driven testing and keyword-driven testing. Now let's take an example of a scenario where we have to compare two variables. Let's suppose we have to compare two integers whether they are equal or not. Now this is a functionality that we have to repeat multiple times in a keyword. For that, we can actually use templates in Robot Framework, which convert the keyword-driven test cases to the data-driven test cases. And the test cases with the template only contains the argument for the template keyword. To understand it better, let's go back to the Ride framework actually. Now over here, I am going to create another test case. So let's give the name over here TC05. You see an option over here which is known as template. Now in this template, let's for now suppose we are using this template option. We'll be using this keyword over here. I'm just going to expand it over here. So let's say should be equal as integers. Let's take this option. So I'm going to click over here. For here, I'm going to provide two integers. Let's say should be equal, then we can say as 4. Now think of a functionality where we have to equate two variables, let's say 10 times in this test case, or maybe 20 times. Then it does not make sense that we use this keyword again and again. What we can do is consider this keyword as a template and just provides the argument in the test cases. So what we can do is we can use this as a template. So I typed it over here as a template over here. I can just give a comment. This is a template. Now here actually I can delete this now. And over here I can actually write 4 over here and delete it from here. Now if we run this test case, I'm going to go back here. I'm going to select this test case and select run. Now you can see our test case have been run successfully, and if I go to the log of this test case, I can see should be equal as integers. We use 4 and 4. Now let's say we want to do it for multiple arguments. So I'm going to go back to my edit. I'm going to say 6, 6, probably 8, 8, 12, 12. I'm going to save my test case. I'm going to go back to run. I'm going to run it again. As you can see, the test case have been passed. Now if I go to the log of this test case, as you can see over here, the same keyword has been run multiple times, but the good thing is that we didn't have to write the name of the keyword again and again. So this is the functionality that a template provides to a test case. Now this is just a demo example which we have taken. The real world scenario for this can be considered if you have to compare the expected result and the actual result from a, let's suppose, a website. Then we can use this keyword. We can use the keyword should be equal as strings, and we have one variable defined, and we want to compare what's the output we got from the web based. Then in this case we can use this keyword multiple times inside our test cases. Now let's look at the last test case setting which we have, which is known as timeouts. So timeouts exist in both test suite and test case. The test timeout in the settings tables define a default test timeout value for all the test cases inside the test suite, whereas the timeout in the test case table applies a timeout to an individual test case, and this overrides the possible default value which we have in the test suite. Also, you can write custom messages after timeouts, but if we have not written any custom messages after timeout, Robot Framework provides the default message. Now let's go back to the ride editor. Over here you can see there was the test suite, we have a test timeout. Now if I go to the test case over here, the timeout of this test case means that this is the timeout which overrides the default value of the test case timeout written in the test suite. Let's say this is 6 minutes. So in test suite the default timeout for each test case is 5 minutes, but if I write over here 6 minutes, it will override the value of 5 minutes. Now it's very simple to write timeout in the test case. So we will just click on the timeout over here. It says that this is the maximum time before which the keyword or the test is allowed to execute before aborting it forcefully. And as I told you, it overrides the test timeout set on the suite level. We can use the syntax something very similar. If let's suppose we have 2 minutes in this, so we can write 2 minutes. Also we can write the seconds over here, so we can write 20 seconds, and we can provide a comment over here. This is my test timeout. I'm going to click on OK. Now this automatically converts from what we write as MIN to minutes and to seconds. Now the test cases which I have currently are very small test cases and they execute within seconds, but when we'll be having our test cases which will be very large test cases, the end-to-end automation when we'll be performing using Robot Framework, and at that time we'll be having the timeouts, and you will get to know the real functionality of the timeouts. But in this case, as we know that this test case will be executed in settings. So that is all for the documentation, setup, teardown, tags, timebound, templates. We covered all the test case related settings. This was all for this video, and I'm going to see you in the next video. Thank you.